Hi, I'm Lester, a mural painter, and I want to teach you guys some really valuable art lessons using your care package, your self-care package that came with oil pastels. So we're talking about value today, and value simply means the light and the dark in your artwork. And what a value scale is how we arrange those lights and darks. So we have a light value here, and we have all the steps in between until it becomes black. We can also use it in reverse, see the black, and all the steps we need to take to get to white. So why is that important? It's important to know the value so we can establish the corners and the edges of the objects that we draw, and that helps us establish a foreground and a background to give us a nice feeling of depth in our artwork. In other words, it makes the artwork easier to see. If we have two lights together, it's hard to see the edges. If we have two darks together, it's hard to see the edges. But if we use a light and a dark side by side, the edges are a little easier to see. Now, the best example in our pastels are the white pastel and the black pastel. These are the great examples of value, because we have the lightest and we have the darkest. But we also want to figure out, how do we know the other colors? How do we know where they are on our value scale? So what I do is called the squint test. And it's really easy to do. It's just meaning you close your eyes and let tiny amount of light in. So when you're looking at your pastels, it'll show you, because your eyes are just squinted so much, it'll show you which is lighter and which is darker. So let's give that a try. So we're going to do the squint test with the white pastel and the black pastel. So I'm going to put down a nice heavy square here and a white. I'm really pressing hard on the white square there. Okay, so when you squint your eyes, pretend you're really sleepy and you can hardly open your eyes. When you squint your eyes at the white square that I put down, you see that the white square blends into the white of the paper and it's almost invisible. But when you look at the black square, when you squint your eyes, you can still see the black on the white paper. You can still see the edges of the black on the white. Here, the edges have almost disappeared. So this white value is the same white value as the paper. That's why it disappears. So let's try a different color. Let's try this green. So when I squint at that, I can still see the edges, but it's not as black as our black pastel here. So I know it's in the middle of the white and the black. So it's right between. You can still see the edges, but it hasn't disappeared. Now with my yellow, when I squint at that, and if I really, really, really squint, I can barely see it. It's not as invisible. I can still see some edges, so I know it's lighter in value. So it's closer to white than it is to the black, because when I squint, I can hardly see it. So that's the squint test. That helps us pick out which colors in our pastels are which values. So value also has an emotional connection. We can use lights and darks to communicate how we feel. So think about this. Think about how you would want to use values to communicate feeling sad or feeling happy. Which values would you use? Which darks or lights would you use to communicate feeling lonely or feeling agitated or nervous? So value is important in creating artwork, but it's also important in creating ways to communicate how we feel. So the homework I want to give you guys is really simple and it's really fun, and it'll help you understand a little bit more about value. So using the squint test, remember, letting out as much light into your eyes when you're looking at objects, so you can see the light and dark of them. I want you to use the squint test and pick out one dark color and one light color from your pastels. And I want you to create a simple object. So one object will be created with just your light pastel that you've picked out, and a second object will be just created with the dark pastel you picked out. No background at this point, just the objects. So pick out a light pastel, create a simple object. It could be a circle or an apple. And then with your dark pastel, create a simple object, again, a circle or an apple or something, and just create that solid color and no background. We can also do something with those simple objects. I want you to take your light object and color in the background with a dark pastel. So if you created, let's say, a white apple, I want you to pick out a dark pastel and fill in the background around it. And with your dark object, let's say you picked a dark blue, I want you to fill in the background with that with a light pastel. So you can kind of see and compare how the objects look with different backgrounds and with different values. So with the homework, I want you to take a light color and a dark color. Now with the squint test that we talked about, when we squint at these colors, we can tell that this light green is closer to the color of the white paper, and this dark blue is closer to the black of our value scale. You could put them up against there. So it's closer to black and this is closer to light. So this will be our light and this will be our dark. So create a really simple object, solid color with your light pastel, and then fill in the background with your dark pastel. See how that really pops this green apple out? And here's the opposite. I have a blue apple. This is our dark value because it's closer to black. And I put it on a light background. This green is a lighter value. It's closer to white. So you can see the difference in how the backgrounds and how our choices of light values and dark values make the artwork stand out. If you want to experiment a bit more, you can try doing a light colored object with a light background or a dark colored object with a dark colored background and see what kind of emotion you can kind of create with these different lights and darks. All right, so with this example, we talked about using a light color for our object and a light color for our background. So I picked a white, which is a light value, and I picked the yellow, which is also a light value. So when you squint your eyes, and you can squint them really, really hard, you can see that the edges of the apple and the edges of this yellow square are almost the same. They really blend into each other. So the edges become really soft. Now with this example, I've used a black as my background and a dark blue as my object color. So these are both in the dark side of the value scale. And when you squint and look at this, and if you squint really, really hard, the apple in the middle almost vanishes and all you see is a nice dark rectangle. So you can do different things, try mixing and matching lights and darks and see what kind of artwork you can come up with. So the value that I'm trying to teach you here with the lights and darks and pastels is something that I use for my murals. So it's really important to understand. And if you want to learn more, you can come to our virtual art lessons. They'll be at Strive at home schedule. Hope to see you there.